Hey, welcome back. I want to start this video off by saying that I never planned on making a fidget spinner video since there are a billion on YouTube, and I never even thought of making them and selling them. But this weekend I made one and posted one on my Instagram, which you should check that out. If you're not, I'll put a link down below, put it on the screen too. And a bunch of people really liked it, and so I created an Etsy page, and within less than 12 hours, I already had 4 orders. So I'm going to go ahead and show you the fidget spinner that I made. I'm going to walk you through designing it in Fusion and even doing some renders in Blender from the Fusion model to use as your product photo, and rather than printing out one in every single color filament that you have. This way you can just do a 3D render of it and not have to worry about printing a bunch. So let's jump into Fusion here, and we're going to start out with a sketch, and I'm going to do a center diameter circle for the bearing size. And most 3D prints will actually shrink a little bit when you print them, so I'm actually going to make this hole bigger than the bearing so it is a nice press fit. And I'm going to go to 22.5 millimeters, and the standard bearing size is 22. The normal skateboard bearing. So we'll do 22.5. And now I'm going to get my outer diameter, which I worked mine out to be 40. I'm making this one a little bit smaller. I'm only doing one bearing with some hex nuts on the outside. I'm not going to be doing the 3 bearings on the outside that most of them have. Okay, so now I'm going to draw a line out to the position I want the center of the hex nut to be. And I found that to be about 26 millimeters. Now I'm going to go to Sketch and do a polygon right in the center of that. And I'm using 5 millimeter hex nuts, which I want to give it a little bit extra dimension too, so that this also can press fit. And there we go. And now I'm going to draw a center rectangle around this to kind of find how much space I want around that hex nut. And just kind of eyeballing it here. Let's do 17 by 15. And now we can trim off this extra stuff that we don't need. You could keep it too. It just makes it a lot cleaner for doing your extrusions if you don't have this there. And I don't want that to be square, so what I'm going to do is add a fillet to these and round those 2 off. And I think 4 looks pretty good. Now I'm going to take all of those elements that I just sketched, select them, and do a circular pattern, and choose my center. My circle is the center point, and however many I want to go around. I really like 3, so I'm going to go with 3 here. Now you could stop here and extrude this the height of your bearing, which I believe is about 7 millimeters. And you could leave it at that and be done, or we can do some chamfers on here. And I like the chamfer, one, because it gives you a nice surface to pry it off of your print bed after you're done printing, but also kind of gives it a nice, kind of more aggressive look. Now when I did that chamfer, you can see I kind of cut into these spots here, which I don't want. So I can go back into my sketch, and we can change. Let's see, let's just do an offset, and let's give it another 1.5 mils. And now I'm going to go ahead and do another circular pattern, choose that center point again, and it will put the, and that'll create a pattern around that same thing. So now I can hit OK, trim off all this extra stuff. Now we can stop our sketch, and see we got some errors in our fillet, so we can go back into this because those edges that I had before selected no longer exist. And now we're going to go ahead back to chamfer, and there we have it. So now that you have that, you could easily just go ahead and send this to your 3D printer. Open up Cura and put as many as you want on here and just print them out. I'm going to take this one step further, and I'm actually going to model the bearing and the hex washers and take that into Blender to do some 3D renders of it. You can do 3D renders inside Fusion, but I find it's a little bit more difficult than using something like Blender. And so now we can go back to our sketch and put in our, start sketching the hex nuts and the bearing itself. So I'm going to go back and do my 5mm hex and try to make it straight. The other thing we can do is select these and do an offset of negative 0.25, because that's how much bigger I made it for the press fit. And then I'm going to draw the circle for the center. And off, there we go. Now I can take this one more time, my inside one, and do another circular pattern, following the same thing that I did before. And now we're going to put all those in there, so I only have to do that sketching once. And now I'm going to do the same thing here. We're going to do 22mm for the bearing, and the inner race of the bearing is 7mm. And I'm going to draw a little bit extra. I want to say it's probably about 9mm. I didn't measure that part. And we'll do an offset here as well, just so I can have the bearing shield modeled in here as well. So that I didn't measure either, but since it's just for a render, it's not really critical. So now we can stop our sketch. Oops, and do some extruding. Now that we have these, we can kind of do some more modeling to what the hex nut actually looks like with a rule fillet. This allows me to select the face rather than the edges to do a fillet across all of these surfaces. So we'll just do a small fillet on that. And now I can actually go in here and select the inside of the hex nuts and create a thread. And since this doesn't really matter that much, I'm just going to go ahead and choose this M5 thread size and hit OK. So now we have our nuts, hex nuts finished, and we'll go ahead and extrude the bearing. So this is earlier why I said it's easier to get rid of those different things. So if I want to extrude this whole bearing, I need to click each individual section of it and bring that up 7mm, this here. So I can do an extrude again, and I want to select that sketch to recess the bearing shield, but I can't select it with this, not easily anyway. So I'm going to hide this body real quick and select what I designed for the shield. And now I can turn the body back on. And for my start plane, I want to do from object, and I'm going to sink it down not very far, probably about -3. We can go -5 just to accentuate it a little bit more and make sure it's set to cut. So now we have our bearing modeled and our hex nuts and the actual fidget spinner itself. So the next thing to do, we're going to rename these real quick just for organizational purposes. And now we are ready to get this to Blender. You could do all of this here and put some appearances on in Fusion and go into the render environment and you know, do all your settings in here. I'm not a huge fan of this, especially if I need to do multiple color variations. I just really like Blender a lot more for this kind of work. So we're going to select our elements. Unfortunately, I don't know of a way where you can select all of them and export them all at once. So I'm going to do them individually. So you select, I'm going to select the body, save as STL. So I'm just going to save these all out real quick. And now we're ready to take this into Blender. First you need to have a billion windows open and go into Blender. Delete out your default cube. I'm going to delete out the lighting source for right now too. Now we want to go to File, Import, STL. If you don't see this, I don't know if it's by default. If you don't see it, you can actually go to User Preferences and in Add-ons, search for STL, and you can check this and it'll give you the option to import and export STL files. So now we're ready to import these. We're going to go to Import, STL, and go to our folder where we had those. Select all of them and import. It's probably going to come in really weird, so we can rotate this along X, 90 degrees, scale it down. We can go into our camera view by hitting 0 and position this where we want it. And now we can start doing our adding materials to this. So I'm going to go into Cycles Render. It gives you a more realistic render environment. It's a little bit slower, but if you have a good graphics card, it goes pretty quickly. So, and now go over to my Materials tab and create a new material. And this I'm going to call Stainless. And we can do a glossy shader and make that kind of gray to give us the texture for the hex nut. You can see here I still don't really see much. So what we want to do is add a background image to the scene. And so we're going to go to the world, use nodes, and for our color we're going to open up this and go to environment texture, and we're going to go to an HDR image that you can find these online or you can create your own. I'm not going to get into that, but you can look up HDR images and you can find a lot of really great ones for this kind of thing. So you have here, it gathers the light from the image surrounding your object. And I actually really like these studio textures that I have. These studio textures kind of give you a different, some interesting lighting sources here. So now you can see that glossy stainless shader that we made comes across as glossy now, and it looks like a hex nut. Now we can go in here, and if you want it really shiny, mirror finish, change your roughness down to 0. This isn't very realistic, but so you play with your roughness until you kind of get that right mix of glossy and mirror finish that you're going for. And now we can select our other ones and add the materials to those as well. Now I want to put that on the bearing as well. So select the bearing. I don't want the entire thing stainless. I'm actually going to be mimicking what bearings that I have that have a kind of a blue metallic bearing shield in it. So I'm going to get out of rendered mode real quick, get back to material, and now I'm going to go into edit mode and deselect these and go into face select mode and select the ones that I want to have a different color. So now I'm going to add a new material slot to this, and I can take the old one and click this plus button, and it makes a duplicate, and then I can rename this blue metal and change my color to match what I've got. And to assign that material, just click Assign. Now I'm going to select everything and scale it down just a little bit too, so it fits in my camera view a little bit better. And kind of position this in a spot where I can get more in the scene. Now I'm going to hit Shift D to duplicate and bring another one in here. Maybe rotate this on the Z a little bit, give it some more interest. And duplicate this one. And rotate that along the Z again. And duplicate one more time. And this one I'm going to do something different with. So now we have 4 fidget spinners that we can change colors to. So let's go back into material, choose our first one, add a new material, and I'm going to make this one actually my clear PETG that I have. And we're going to do a mix shader with this one. This allows you to combine 2 different shaders into one. And first we're going to do a transparent shader and bring the alpha value down on that. And then the next shader we're going to do is a glossy shader. This is going to give us a translucent inside and a glossy outside. So if I zoom in here, you can see what I mean. So you can see there how it's now translucent and glossy, but that gives you your clear material. And I know it looks a lot more clear than what a clear PET actually prints like. Now I'm going to mimic a blue ABS that I have, so new. I call this blue ABS. And we're going to do a mix shader again, and this time do a diffuse and also a glossy. And we're going to try to pick color blue that my filament is. Now if we change the color of the glossy shader, you can see it affects the glossiness of it, the color of the glossiness. So we can add some roughness to that to make it not as shiny, depending on what your filament looks like. The blue that I have actually comes out pretty shiny, so I'm just going to tweak these a little bit. And the next one that I'm going to do, which I don't know of a way of doing this in Fusion 360, so this is another reason why you want to go into Blender, is doing my glow-in-the-dark filament. So we're going to add new, call this glow PETG, spell glow right. And we're going to do another mix shader, and this time we're going to do an emission, which is a light source. And then we're also going to do a glossy shader as well. And glossy. Now for the color, I want to pick kind of what it looks like when it glows in the dark, which is a really faint green color. And you can kind of accentuate this a little bit too. We can adjust our strength to make it glow more or glow less. And we can adjust our glossy shader too to get the right glossy look for the material. So that is 3 different materials that I have to print with. This way I can show the different materials that I have when selling it on Etsy without having to print each individual color that I have, which would take a long time. Since it's not very interesting now, what we can do is add a new plane. I'm going to go to Create Plane, scale this up so it covers the whole scene. You could also do like an infinity background kind of thing. I'm just going to keep this very simple for right now. And add a new material, and I'm just going to call this floor. And if we go into rendered mode now, we can see that this is a little bit more interesting of a scene. So you can see the glow of the glow-in-the-dark filament. You could keep it diffuse, but I'm actually going to go and make this a glossy shader just to give it a little bit more extra character to the scene. So this will pick up all of those colors that are in the environment lighting and reflect them on this surface. And the rougher you make it, the less it's going to be reflecting. But now that looks like a pretty good scene. Now let's take this last one that we don't have a color for yet, and I'm trying to think of another material that I have that I want to show off. Well, let's do purple. Do purple ABS. So now here is an extra special tip. You could just go ahead and render this out now by going to the render, choosing what settings you want as far as file format and all that. But what I want to do is actually render this with one that looks like it's spinning. So I'm going to go ahead and take all of these elements, make sure I got them all selected, and group these. I'm going to do join. And now all of these are selected into one. So what I want to do is, in my timeline, make sure that I'm at 0. I'm going to hit I to set a rotation keyframe. Now I'm going to go ahead to an arbitrary number. Let's just go to 20 and hit rotate Z and just twist this along. If you look at your bottom left corner, you can see how much you're actually rotating it by. So we're going to rotate it by quite a bit. And hit I one more time to lock in that keyframe, that rotation. So now if you see when we scrub through here, it actually moves. So when we play, the whole thing spins. It's kind of hard to see because I rotated it so fast, but the little trick here with that is if we render this out without motion blur, it is going to look like this. Now if we skip forward a couple frames and select motion blur and render this, you're actually going to have the rotation of that fidget spinner model, and it will simulate the motion blur of it actually spinning. So once this finishes rendering, I'll show you what I mean. So now that you have this rendered, you can add this to your Etsy listing with an actual photograph of one you printed, because you don't want to show just a render. You want to show what one physically looks like, because 3D printing is a little finicky, and you're going to have some lines in it and all that, as you can see here on my Etsy listing for this product. So we have the actual 3D print of the one that I made, and then we can click on the render that I did that shows all of the different color versions that I'm offering. And then I put a little guide down below showing what those colors are. And then you can jazz it up with your logo and some text and all that to make it a little bit more interesting looking. Okay, so now when it comes to assembling these, I did it pretty simple. We're just going to take one of our skateboard bearings, and it presses in real nice, press fit, because we designed it that way, and then take our hex nuts and press those in as well, and they should snap in there pretty good. You will be able to pull them out if you really wanted to, because they're just a press fit. Now you have that finished, and you can spin it and fidget with it and play with it and sell it and whatever you want. So I'm going to put a link to the 3D model of this on Pinshape that you can download, and you can print them. You can take them and sell them on your own Etsy store using the same design. All I'd ask is that you just give me some kind of shout out, either share my video or mention to whoever you're selling it to check out this video of how I made these. If you want to buy one, I'll have a link to my Etsy store down below as well. The purpose of this channel is to show you guys how to make awesome stuff and do it yourself. I don't have a ton of interest in mass producing these, but if someone wants one, they don't have a 3D printer, I do have a link to that page, and you can buy one if you want. So thank you very much for watching this video. Hope you learned something. If you have any questions, comments, or anything, leave them in the comments below. Please subscribe if you're not already, and we'll see you guys soon. All right, bye.